Welcome to another edition of Our City. A few things going around the city of Elizabeth this week. Thursday, October 29th at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to attend and speak at Trinitas Regional Medical Center's Rethinking Reentry Task Force Forum, which will be held in Grassman Hall, located 655 East Jersey Street. On Saturday, October 31st from 4 to 6, the First Ward Councilman, Carlos Torres, will host a Halloween extravaganza in Jackson Park. It's located at 136 2nd Street. This event will feature a haunted house, tricks and treats, awards for best dressed costume, and the best trunk or treat display, the Michael Jackson Thriller dance, and more. So if you want more information, please call 908-370-5214. And as we approach Halloween on this Saturday and Mischief Night on Friday evening, please keep your children safe. Please keep your children with you during Halloween. It is important to check the candy and check the bags that you receive. It's absolutely important that the parents are involved in all of their children's efforts on Halloween. So I hope everyone has a safe Halloween. And if you want more information concerning these events, please call our Public Information Office at 908-820-4124. And please stay with us after these quick messages.
Sometimes you learn by helping others learn. Kean University.
Welcome back to Our City. And I'm pleased to be joined by Miss Elise Cherry, who is the CEO of Boston Community Capital. And every year, the City of Elizabeth, along with the United States Conference of Mayors and other agencies, produces a financial planning day here in our city. And Ms. Cherry, we want to thank you for taking part in this year's financial planning day. Please tell us about yourself first. You've been involved in this a while.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have been involved at Boston Community Capital for a while. In fact, I helped found the organization 30 years ago when I was a young lawyer, and then came in about 18 years ago to run it full time. We were very small when we started. We had about $3,500, but I'm pleased to report that we have now crossed the $1 billion mark in terms of monies invested out and so forth, and that we actually...
So you took a company that was worth $3,500 and grew it to $1 billion.
Correct.
That's a success to begin with.
Well,
Nothing else said.
We're quite pleased about it, and our mission is to help build healthy communities where low-income people live and work, and that has been our mission consistently for the last 30 years, and we have now expanded beyond Boston's neighborhoods really to transactions across the country.
And Elise, what made you get involved in this as a young lawyer and saying this is what I want to do, and you know,
I always
long time
thought
to build something like that?
It's true. I always thought it was really important to really build a values-based life and to assure that the education that all of us had gotten and so forth really went to creating the world that we wanted as opposed to a world that was going in a different direction. I grew up in a town in Massachusetts called Revere, I think probably not very dissimilar from Elizabeth, a lot like Elizabeth, and really had the benefit of Revere's public schools and their teachers and so forth, and it always seemed important to me to assure that I took that forward.
Silly question, but is Revere named after Paul Revere?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it is.
So I figured in Massachusetts, that's probably the only state. Okay.
Yes, we border Boston to the north.
To the north. So you have a program with Boston Community Capital called the SUN program.
Yes. Can
you please tell our viewers what is the SUN program and how does it work?
Sure. So SUN stands for Stabilizing Urban Neighborhoods, and what it is really is a foreclosure relief undertaking, and I'm a little bit sad to say I think it's still the only one in the country that actually works this way. What we do is we work with homeowners who are in default or foreclosure, and if they have some form of current income, might not be enough to pay a mortgage at the old rate that they had, but a mortgage at a current market rate, then what we do is to attempt to buy their home from the lender who's foreclosing, from the bank, and if we can do that and buy it at a steeply discounted price, then we turn around and sell it back to the homeowner with a new 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. And on balance, we've now done better than $90 million of these mortgages. We've been able to stabilize better than 600 families. We're in 5 states in this particular initiative, in Massachusetts, where we started, also Maryland, Rhode Island, Illinois, and now New Jersey.
The SUN program is something that was conceived by Boston Community Capital
and
yourself.
That's correct, yes.
And when you conceived this program, how old is the program now?
We started lending in 2010.
So it's relatively new.
Yes.
This is a growth of the recession that occurred in the late 2000s?
Yes, we were looking at the housing market and looking particularly at the neighborhoods that concern us, which are generally low-income neighborhoods, in the 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe, and realizing that housing prices were going up, but income was not going up. And it was very hard for us to understand how anybody could support a larger mortgage when they really hadn't had an increase in income. And of course, then the crash came, and it turned out that people really couldn't support those larger mortgages. So we saw a big drop in housing values, and what we realized was that any lender that had a mortgage on homes that had dropped in value was not going to be able to get anyone to buy them at anything higher than the current market value. And so that if we could buy them back at this discounted rate, we could sell them back to the homeowner and potentially help stabilize families and stabilize neighborhoods. So we've actually been able, on average, to reduce both monthly housing expense and also outstanding principal amount by almost 40%.
So, Elise, why would a bank want to do this? I mean, I struggle with this in my city. I'm sure mayors struggle with it a lot. Why does a bank want to discount the money they think they're going to get, even though if the homeowner can't pay, they're getting nothing anyway? So why would a bank enter this arrangement?
Well, a bank doesn't want a discount, of course. They prefer to get the whole amount of their mortgage. The problem is, if you had a home that was worth, say, $300,000 in 2005, and now it's worth $200,000, no one is going to pay $300,000. Not the homeowner, not a third-party purchaser, no one. So the bank, essentially what we're saying to the bank is, we're prepared to buy this from you at exactly the same price anybody else would buy it from you. You don't take a bigger loss because you sell to us. What you get by selling to us is you get to help stabilize a family and stabilize a neighborhood, but you're not going to get a dime less.
So the SUN program, how would a average folk who's having difficulty with the mortgage, how would they know the SUN program exists, and how would they even be able to apply for it?
Sure. Well, one way people know that the SUN program exists is because we go and we do programs like this with mayors like you and really try and let people know. We also put articles in local newspapers. We send flyers around. We do every single thing we can think of to try and make certain that people know about us. We have a phone number, which I'm going to read here, and I think maybe going up on the screen as well. It's 855-604-4663. And that's a number that people can call. We have people on the other end of those phones, real live human beings, who will help people through the process and so forth. But the critical thing to know if applying for SUN is something that you're thinking about is, first, you need to be in one of the states that we're working in, and New Jersey would be one of those states. Second, you need to be a homeowner in default or foreclosure, meaning that you are behind in some way, at least, on your mortgage. It can be pre-foreclosure or post-foreclosure, but you've really got to be in foreclosure. It's not simply enough to have a mortgage that's worth more than the cost of your home. And then the third thing is you need to have some form of current income. Now, it could be Social Security income, it could be disability, it could be work income, it can be a variety of things. But what we're really trying to figure out is there enough income coming into the family to be able to support a mortgage at a current price? We have 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Our mortgages are 6 3/8%. And some folks might say, well, geez,
that's high, right?
Well, it depends, right?
Okay.
Some people might say, I've been seeing mortgages advertised at 4%. But the problem is 4% mortgages are for people who have really pristine credit, right? A credit score of, maybe above 700. The challenge for us is every single person we're working with is in either default or foreclosure. And so for the most part, they can't get a mortgage at all. And the other challenge that we have, you may have seen how low interest rates are generally, and our banking colleagues can borrow money at maybe 0.25%. We borrow money at about 4.25% because we're not a big giant national bank. And so, of course, we have to be charged more in order to take account of our higher borrowing costs. But what we say to folks is if you can find a mortgage somewhere else at a cheaper price, you absolutely should go get that. But I think virtually everybody who comes to work with us is simply not eligible for credit anywhere else because their credit's been destroyed by the process of the foreclosure.
So if they come in for a mortgage at 6.38% with you, and the mortgage is naturally higher than some other lending institutions, however, their principal is lower because you've now bought the house at a reduced price. So the overall mortgage payment, counting their principal and interest in what you're attempting to do, is less.
Generally, it's less on both counts because often the mortgages people have are at a good deal higher than 6 3/8 on an interest rate. But yes, we also were able to reduce the principal substantially, and so it's reduced in that way too. For example, if you take a mortgage at, say, an original mortgage at, say, $300,000, by the time that comes down almost 40%, you're really talking about a mortgage now that might be $200,000 or $180,000. It's individualized in each case, of course, but it's a really substantial discount in terms of what people typically have been paying or trying to pay. So it generally is very favorable for the homeowner.
So one of the questions I have here, and you answered, you said it was probably the only program in the country, but one of the questions they've asked me to ask is, what makes it different than other modification programs that other banks have?
Sure.
I have found, when I've referred people to banks to try and, or through my staff, that banks don't want to deal with modification programs, and they basically do a good talk, but they really don't want to deal with the modification program. Well, is that true, or you're not going to condemn banks? I understand that you're in that business, but that's what I find.
Well, I can't speak for my banking colleagues. We're a nonprofit in this business, and so I keep saying, if the government or the lenders or whatever would like to take this over, I'd happily go out of business in about a minute. But really, I think one of the most significant differences is most modification programs reduce principal, but then they take that principal and they add it on to the back end of the loan, right? So you actually still owe the money. And so the challenge is, when you think about how much housing prices would have to appreciate, so if you say you sold the house in 20 years, you still owe the money that they attach to the back end of the loan.
And if it doesn't appreciate that much, you can't pay that money.
Well, that's the problem, and particularly in lower income areas, what we've seen is that although the housing market has come back in middle and upper middle income areas, it really hasn't come back in lower income areas. And the reason is pretty straightforward, which is that incomes have not increased, right? So lower income people tend to be paying a larger percentage of their income for housing in the first place, and wages haven't gone up, so the ability for homes to appreciate is very, very limited. So if you take, again in my example, a $300,000 home, and now as a result of a modification you're paying $200,000, but when you come to sell it, you've still got that $100,000 on the back end, you're never going to get any equity out of the home.
Is that what the term underwater means?
Well, underwater generally refers to homes that have a mortgage that is in a higher amount than the value of a home. So say you have a home that's worth $200,000, but a mortgage at $300,000, we'd refer to that as an underwater home.
Foreclosures are very trying on any home owner. And when it happens, they don't know who to call, and some are even afraid to admit their financial status, or embarrassed by it, or something. Is there a process to stop the foreclosures, or the foreclosure on an individual home? Is there anything you can do?
Well, there are really a couple of approaches to that. One thing that sometimes happens is that a homeowner will declare bankruptcy, because often people in foreclosure not only have challenges with respect to the home mortgage, but they've also often run up their credit cards in an attempt to free up cash to pay the mortgage and so forth. And so a bankruptcy filing, a personal bankruptcy filing, will stop a mortgage for a period of time. The other way to stop a foreclosure is to try and negotiate with a bank to take a sum. You could perhaps sell the home in a short sale and negotiate with the bank to take a sum of money that will release the mortgage. Or if you qualify to work through SUN, we will often buy the home from the lender pre-foreclosure. From a foreclosing bank's perspective, it's much more cost-effective to sell the home early in the process than to go through the entire expense of foreclosure. So if a homeowner qualifies, and if we can persuade the bank to sell to us, then that will often stop a foreclosure process too.
So before we go to the break, is there a fee to join the SUN program, or application process?
That's a good question. There is no fee to apply, and there's no fee all the way along until you actually get to a closing. And what we can talk about after the break is how you actually get to a closing. But you're not going to pay a fee unless you actually get your home back with a new mortgage. And then, of course, there are fees.
Please stay with us, and we'll come back with that question after the break. A few messages, and back with Miss Elise Cherry talking about the SUN program being offered to residents in New Jersey.
We're an American original. Dependable, historic, nuanced, with all the comforts of home, even when you're just visiting. So we're celebrating for all that we've left untouched all that we've changed. A place where the past meets the future. So consider this your invitation.
We've been celebrating here in Elizabeth for 350 years, and we're just getting started.